Thank you for tuning in to the Natty News Daily podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Core Nutritionals. You can check out corenutritionals.com for all your supplement needs and use code Natty News Daily at checkout to save 20%. Enjoy the episode.
All right, what's happening, people? Welcome to another episode of Natty News Daily. We've got Mr. Eric Helms back on in quick succession from his recent appearance on the podcast, but you may notice a thinner face because he is 3 weeks out from the first one of the season.
Just a little over 4.
A little
Yeah.
over 4.
So it's I'm on the same calendar day we're recording this here in New Zealand is the same calendar day I'll be competing next month. So
yeah, we're in a
30th
time
August
right now.
30 September. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, man.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on at this stage in prep. I know a lot of people would be maybe a little heavier feet than you appear to be right now. So that's good. That's a good sign.
I just got off of an 1.5-hour posing session with Jeff Alberts. So he was putting me through my paces.
Nice.
Ready to rock, bro. I mean, honestly, if you're in prep and you're 4 weeks out, I get it. It's hard. It's 5 weeks out. But if you can't have an hour-long conversation with your fellow homies in the natural bodybuilding community just because you're dieting too hard, you got to change your style.
Yeah, step it up, people. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. And you know, this is kind of something that you wanted to touch on based on a previous conversation we had about like how to make the sport better, you know, things we can do to improve this whole game. So let's give you the floor, man. What was your attraction to wanting to talk about this with us, and you know, your thoughts with how we can make this whole thing better?
Yeah, no, you guys did a really great episode with Silas recently, where you guys had a discussion about what is some of the ways we can improve natural bodybuilding. And I think understandably, the people involved are fans of bodybuilding. You guys are fans of bodybuilding. I'm a fan of bodybuilding. And the focus has been on, all right, okay, where has success been in bodybuilding? And obviously the NPC IFBB has been the most successful from an organizational perspective. Maybe a little less so now that there's the IFBB split. But as far as people are concerned in the States, they don't really see that. If you go outside of the States, there's actually quite a large split between the two IFBBs internationally.
Yeah, especially in Europe. In Europe, there's
Yes.
the IFBB Elite, and they're massive.
Yes, they are, because almost all of the IFBB shows outside of the US went and maintained the same sanction. And you know, that's a whole other thing we could talk about, like how there's actually natural shows in both of those now, and it depends on what country you're in because it was part of like WADA and part of the games, but a conversation for another time. So I think it's very understandable to look to them. What are they doing that's successful? And that's generally what natural bodybuilding has done since the beginning. Oh, they got bikini, let's get bikini. Oh, they've got this other division, let's get that other division. Oh, they're doing this, let's do that. Oh, they've got classic, let's do that, even though it maybe doesn't make that much sense. But and maybe it does from a business standpoint because CBum's popular. You know, if it brings more numbers, sure. And I think there's an argument to be made there. But ultimately, I think there are some differences that are not going to be surmounted because we've had the same conversation a billion times. We've been saying unite the clans since 10 years before I got into natural bodybuilding. And there's been drama related to separation between where the best of the best are. I remember all the way back in the mid 2000s, the WNBF, under 2 different changes of management, wouldn't allow other competitors to compete with them. And then that went away, and there was clamoring and all this, and there was the Atlas. It was the first time something like the Mr. America, like a non-sanctioned, hey, all pros are allowed to come in. It didn't go well. There were some issues not paying people and other things, but there's been some of these same things occurring for a long period of time. And I think it is all well and good to say let's unite all of natural bodybuilding, but that actually has to happen. And I don't think anyone except for all of the people at the top of the federations have to be on the same page there. And they have tried, they have met. And I think there's just a lot of long-standing bad blood and a lot of history. And I don't know how realistic it is. I think we could see things to where you have a more dominant fed at best, but I think there's still going to be 20, 30 plus natural bodybuilding feds, especially in the US. And I don't think that's going to change anytime.
That number just makes my head spin just thinking 20 federations with 20 pros and 20 world champions and 20 this, 20 that. Like, it just, that number already, the listeners are like, what? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, our dis-ease and dislike of that is not enough to make a change, because that's been something I've hated since
Damn
the
it.
beginning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. However, if we look to another model where we are just barely beating them in terms of who has more federations, like if that's the goal, who has the most federations and the most widely spread, like we're crushing international bodybuilding, just behind us, though, is powerlifting. And there's a lot of federations in powerlifting. And the funny thing is, the inverse is the largest genetic pool, the largest number of people involved in a single federation is actually on the tested side. So you've got the IPF, and they kind of had their recent split too, just like the IFBB with the USAPL. And that's changing and shifting. And some of the things that powerlifting does really well are things that we could do with bodybuilding to create more unity, even if there is not actual federation unity. So something that you guys may not be aware of is what's called open powerlifting. So open powerlifting is a bunch of software engineers who are also powerlifters who got together and created this open source website where you can see the results of every meet that comes in. They collate it, and you can see whether you're literally across. Like if you look at the number of federations, you're like, oh shit, powerlifting is just as fractured as we are. And you can see that they have. You can look up someone's name, and you can see all of the meets they've ever done, any sanctioned competition, first, second, third attempt, age, height, weight. And it's a huge undertaking, and the people who do it are awesome. Shout out to Joe Whiteley and the other people involved with open powerlifting. But the thing is you can find out about everyone's competition and you can look them up, and it's this ability to look across things. Right now, it is next to impossible to figure out when someone did a show, what they placed, how many people were in their division, did they win prize money, was it a pro or an amateur show, where was it, and what happened. So I think if we had a group of people with the tech savviness and the willingness to stay in touch with all of the different federations and requesting them and actually creating a format for them to report show results that was unified. So for example, if you use Lifting Cast, there's specific software that's you run at a meet so you can see who's up next in the attempt and all that.
Yep.
It integrates so they can just directly import it. And if you just created a specific Excel spreadsheet or a PDF or a Word doc or whatever that some of the people who are of an older generation running these shows are comfortable using, and even created software that was, for example, so judges could use it. They could, put their scores for the symmetry round or the muscularity round, if that's the way it's organized or whatever, and then it collates together, automatically calculates a score. There's tiebreakers, whatever. I mean, it would actually force some of the people involved to make sure their judging was legit on the day too. Nice side benefit. But if you create this algorithm-based software that inputs and spits out a nice clean spreadsheet that any federation could use, you could have openbodybuilding.com, and then all of that could get uploaded, and we can look to see how is everyone doing across federations.
James,
And you could
relax,
go,
would you?
Leroy's smiling because he knows like we thought about attempting this, and then it was just like, I don't have the time for this at all. Like this is not
So
possible.
interestingly enough, my original vision for what was our original website was something like this, where Eric Helms competes in 4 weeks. He has a profile, uploads all his show photos, and it would then be housed there, and you could upload your competition history. This would be used specifically by you, so obviously that's a little bit more like, you need thousands of athletes to do it. But if you just had every organization, instead of 10,000 athletes that had to upload information, you had the 20 organizations. That's cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be good for you guys to actually talk to the folks involved in open powerlifting, because they would tell you it is too much. It's all volunteers. We have day jobs. It's hard. And we get a lot of like now that they've established it, people expect it. Like it's a right to have this thing, all these people volunteering. We're not even close to that yet. But and the thing is for each lifter who has an Instagram profile, it's just linked.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to see like the video of the meets, because most lifters promote it themselves, you're not actually requiring them to post on open powerlifting. You go right Eric Helms, and then you go, oh, I'm going to click on his profile. And then if the bodybuilder is someone who shares their stuff, you can see their routine, you can see their placing, you can see pictures. So with an integration with just a link to your Instagram, creating software for judges that automatically compiles the results in a standardized format and then gets sent centrally. and you just have to spend the time writing the code to actually input it into this online database. Um, the I think some of the things are difficult to translate, like, you winning a show with one other person in it. What does that mean? Um,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but it is what it is. Some of the things won't port over directly. Like like it's interesting. So in untested powerlifting, where it's much more divided than tested, because the IPF is dominant, but there's not really that dominant equivalent on the untested side. They're just going against records against each other. So they're looking up like, okay, what's the heaviest untested total? I want to go after that, and they do it in some meet, and they're not going head to head. And that's a similar problem we have in bodybuilding. Now, you can't solve that because there's no such thing as like an objective bodybuilding outcome, but you can create a place where everyone's aware of what everyone else is doing. And I think
Mhm.
that's one step. Um,
Before we go
and
too far with that, I want to interject because there was another group that actually attempted to do this just to kind of
mm,
they had a point system. Local shows where, win was X amount of points, second place X amount of points, whatever. Then they had like your premier shows, which were worlds, Mr. A, all the different worlds, like all that different stuff. Those scored more points, and they started to try and collate those. But I think same thing. It kind of like petered out. It was very big in like OCB and ANBF for the physique guys because those are the guys that started it. And then they
Oh, I
went,
remember what you're talking
this
about.
is way too much. If you search it, I'm sure that page is still live. It's Natty Top 10,
mm,
I think, on Instagram, and they were doing a good job, but
ah,
just it's too much.
yeah, unfortunately, it does require this kind of critical mass and critical key players who have the technical know-how, the willingness, and the time to devote to it. And you can do the whole Wikipedia thing, like, hey, please donate, but we're probably looking at a very small community. So
Mhm.
it does require just the altruism of a select group of super fans.
Anybody who's
So
watching
that's a
that is
barrier.
familiar with Chat GPT that can help us with this, hook us up.
Hey.
Make the
No,
computers
honestly,
work for us.
like, to be serious, like, the tech is coming around. Like, you
Oh,
get
for
someone who
sure.
knows how to use
Please,
R.
please look up every WMBF records, and it'll just like have any of you used Chat GPT before? GPT
Yeah.
before?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely insane. Like if we typed in, please give me all WMBF Worlds results. Like if they're online, it'll pull it up.
Up till September 2021. That's
Oh
there's
yeah,
some
that's right.
unfortunate limitations of when the cutoff is, but there's plugins that people are creating all the time. Like academics will use it as like a digital assistant. There's plugins so that you can actually pull from Google Scholar if it's open access and get around the 2021 thing. There are ways. There are people who are far more savvy than I. So that's one thing. Another thing is actually engaging with really top quality live streams, and live streams that are done in such a way that you have a quality announcer who can actually explain what's happening, and that it's maybe even showing the scores as they come out. Like if it was integrated, like if you think about it, like if you're actually entering into a spreadsheet that's live and integrates and
Yep.
it's waiting for all the judges' scores to come in, it can put up like towards the end of the symmetry round, like, oh, here's who's in first, here's who's in second, here's who's in third.
Yeah, that'd
Now
be
all of
cool.
a sudden bodybuilding, which can be quite boring to watch and quite repetitive, and it's visually stimulating because you got cool physiques, right? Especially at a high level. But from a sporting perspective, the only sports that are interesting to watch are the ones where you can actually understand what's happening, right? And if you have to be a fellow bodybuilder or strong physique fan to understand that, it's kind of just like watching a bunch of runway models go over and over and over again. So I think if we want to have any chance of engaging with a larger audience, um, them seeing like, oh, they hit the side relaxed and
And
the
then
symmetry
they
round score
shifted.
changed.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and that's it's number two. Yeah, he actually does look pretty. Like he's got a strong taper from the side. Like that type of thing. I think could add to the ability to and that because like if you make it more visually appealing, then you have a live stream that more people sign up for, and that can bring more eyes on the sport, which can result in more people who could potentially maybe want to do this database thing. So like all of it kind of goes hand in hand. Um, and if a savvy person who is doing something like the Mr. America or one of these shows that allows entrance from any natural bodybuilding pro organization, if they can jump on all these things, if they can do them first, and if they can say, hey, you're going to get an entrance to the Mr. A based upon an open bodybuilding, who's beaten the most bodybuilders? And then we're going to have this live stream that does these things. Now, like that's a bit of a threat to all of the different organizations because they want their own world to do the best, et cetera. But it does create, like if they could realize that that would actually trickle down to everybody and make every organization more popular, I think they would probably be less resistant to it. Um, in my mind, it's kind of the same slightly backwards thinking, or it's kind of crabs in a barrel to where someone goes who's a natural pro and gets an IFBB pro card in classic, right? And then they want to come back and we go, no, 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 no. You shouldn't do that. Like you jump ship. You that's bad for the sport. Is it though? Because someone just went out and got all the visibility that you get as being an IFBB pro, and then they want to bring it back to the national organization.
Yeah.
That's great. You know, like I think we have to think of it from that perspective instead of being territorial and drawing lines. Just accept like here we're pro natural bodybuilding. That's what we're about, and we're not trying to be exclusionary. We are trying to promote something. And if someone doing that, showing, hey, look what I accomplished naturally, I actually could compete on a decent level with pro classic physique people, but
Mhm.
I'm going to go back and now take another world championship. I think that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing from if you look at it from a perspective of what's going to expand the sport. And the same thing is if we have, like, let's just say the Mr. A, it gets really big. They do some of the things we're talking about, and it actually becomes a destination on a higher level than some of the worlds. That's not a bad thing. It's like as much as that might seem like a bad thing. I think we need to stop kind of trying to be like 100 different little mini fiefdoms, and think about what's gonna like what's the saying, a rising tide lifts all ships,
Mhm.
because that's the only way the sport can grow,
Yeah.
given the fractured nature, which I don't think is going to change. If we can't unite the federations, the best thing we can have is shows that unite the best pros,
Yeah.
and then those shows need to be done really well. They need to be absent of politics. They need to have like systems that bring in the best. And they need to be well attended on a live stream and have some monetization so they can actually pay out their pros better, pay out the winners better, I should say. So to me, that's the way forward. And I think looking across the aisle at what the NPC IFBB does can only give us some insight because they're already benefiting from being unified. So a lot of what they have done to be successful is just simply not going to work because we're fractured. So some things, yes, just like putting more effort and time into promotion and interviewing athletes and live streams and good show qualities and not being at a high school auditorium and all those things, 100%. That's all great, like production quality. But as far as, all right, how do we get around the fact that we've got this hugely fractured, people competing against each other when they're not even in the same federation type of deal? That's where I think we have a lot to learn from powerlifting, where there just seems to be a far better organizational approach. And maybe it's just the mindset, like if you look at a powerlifter's training program, they'll be super meticulous about RPE, sets, reps, all this stuff down to a T. And a lot of them seem to be good with spreadsheets and are engineers. And in bodybuilding, for some reason, we don't let that extend outside of like our nutrition. And then we just like do whatever for training. And then also don't know how to do other things. I don't know. We just have eating disorders.
What was the Sheffield event, Eric? Was it like a unified thing?
Great question. So the Sheffield is a perfect example of something like this. It is restricted to the IPF, but that is a company, SBD, who decided, hey, let's put on a champion to champion invitational meet and pull out all the bells and whistles. So um, this is potentially possible if there was a company, whether it was an apparel company, whether it was a supplement company, whether it was one of the typical companies, that is invests a lot and gets a lot out back from the natural bodybuilding community. I could see them doing something like this or promoting it or putting money behind it, because that's basically what the Sheffield did. They said, hey, we're sponsoring all these world teams, and if someone is able to get within 95% of the world record, this is last year's, or rather this year's, I should say, uh, and they're a world champion, or they're a regional representative and there's not a world champion already from there, or they're a wild card pick who's also within 95% of the world record, then we can create the best 12 men, best 12 women, and compete across weight classes. So similar concept to across federations, but we're going to compete based upon who's breaking the world record by more, even if they're two different world records. And now we can see a 52 versus a 84 plus compete against each other on the women's side, for example.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, I follow oh, what's his name? Yeah, youngish guy, crazy deadlifter. What the hell's his name?
There's
Tyler.
a few.
You thinking of Tyler Atwood?
Yes. Yeah, I follow
Taylor
him.
Atwood.
Yes.
Taylor, sorry.
Yeah.
Goodness. Long
Yeah,
day.
no, all good. No, it's all good, man. I mean, there's a ton. There's a lot of people who like powerlifting is at a position that is quite enviable right now, in my opinion. The lifters, like I think the winner of the Sheffield made the equivalent of like $50,000. You know, like if you traveled like when if Doug Miller got a hair up his ass, decided to come back and win every single pro show that he could find the dates and the travel lineup, he might win 50 grand in a year, but he would lose out on flights and hotel rooms, right?
Mhm.
So, but yeah, doing that in one show, boom, Evie Corrigan, Jesus Olivares, they're taking home some big checks. They got a payout for each uh, lift record they broke, and just for totaling higher than the rest as a percentage over the world record. So obviously, we're not there yet, and I think the first thing is the groundswell, but there is a number of things that are connected there. So, like, there's a nice big unified podcast that most people listen to. So Ryan Lapidat, he is the he's the guy. He runs King of the Lifts. It's a pretty good big Instagram. King of Lifts is a pretty big podcast that caters exclusively to powerlifting, and he's like the principal commentator, so used to his voice, and he's a huge super fan. He promotes and does commentary with Joe Whiteley. Joe Whiteley is the typically the second commentator with him, and she's part of like the main force behind Open Powerlifting. And they have the podcast and the Instagram, so like it's all interconnected. Like God forbid, Ryan and Joe die in a car crash and powerlifting's done. But like we don't. I'm saying it like it does rely on some very specific people, and I think you guys are doing a lot of that right already. Like Natty News Daily, the reason why I messaged you guys when I thought about this is I was like, you guys are the closest thing to that. You've got this Instagram page that's promoting winners. You're having conversations. You're keeping up with the news. You've got a great podcast, and you're also talking about how to make the sport better. You're promoting shows. So like you guys are doing so many things right. That I want it to come off as a sign of respect, just that I want to give you guys some of these ideas and maybe who to link to and talk to and things to think about. And just to get probably an outsider's perspective, because I think that is one of the weaknesses that I think natural bodybuilding has, is we're just not that good at thinking outside of the things, the way things have been done.
Yeah.
And like the most creative thing is, well, what do they do over there? Where they take steroids? It's like, all right, come on, like
I know how
So
we can make natural bodybuilding better. Let's all get on the sauce and just
that's right.
fire it
Let's
up.
do what YouTube already thinks we're doing.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So yeah.
Question. So this is just me being a fan now. You take all the best of the best right now. Who's your winner?
That's hard. That is hard. It's so we got like Bada,
So you got like Bada, Meshach, Kendall, David K, the UK,
David K. Mitch Jarve. There's
yeah,
a few guys
Mitch.
in the UK actually.
Throw
Levi.
Brandon Kempter, Daniel. Shoot, what's the other one I just highlighted in my last video?
Cubic.
Who?
Daniel.
Well, yeah. But who was he posing with? The other lightweight WNBF champ.
Oh,
I
he
can
just won the
picture
UAE
him.
one.
Right? Is it Kevin?
Who was the
Kevin? Yeah, Kevin Hernandez.
Kevin Hernandez.
Who was the middleweight winner from Germany? Who almost beat Bada in the overall?
Oh,
Fabian.
yeah.
Fabian's
he's
got to be in there.
Who's
I would love to
OCB?
see
Who's
that lineup.
OCB
That's
champ?
crazy.
Levi.
And then Magnum second. Magnum twice. Yeah.
All right. That's a hell of a. That's
A lot
like
of them is America.
that's a 12 list that would. If you're not even a fan of natural bodybuilding, you'd watch that.
That would be incredible. Yeah, like seeing a battle like that would. So I mean, just to go back to kind of link this back to our prior conversation, when the WNBF then changed hands and they let go of the restriction on who could compete where, and they allowed IFPA pros and them to all come in for a brief period, there was some epic battles for a little while. When we had like Cleveland Thomas and going up against Sean Cunningham and Brian Whitaker. Like what? you know, and
Yeah.
Kiyoshi Moody, throw him in the mix a couple years prior, and Panix Pierre, now, you know, ended up turning IFBB pro, you know, so like those battles were because of some of these changes where there was, hey, we'll let anybody compete, and now like now it's good. I don't want us to move backwards to where there's like a restriction, like, hey, if you go compete in another federation, we'll take your pro card, or we won't let you compete. I think that is a step in the wrong direction. I'm okay with federations saying, hey, you've got to get our pro card if you want to compete with us because we don't have the
For
same
sure.
banned substance list.
Yep.
I can understand that. But I think having the competitions that allow, like, here's our list of federations we allow. If you got a pro card, come on, and as long as you can meet our drug testing standard, then you're welcome. And I think that is where we're likely to have these types of battles. And to answer your question, who I think would win and who I think, like, I actually thought Bada should have lost to Fabian, just because Fabian, to me, it's like the hardness to his physique
Yeah, he looked
and the
insane.
conditioning. I
Yeah.
mean, I get it. Bada's shape is redonkulous and he's so big, but I personally had Fabian ahead at Worlds, and he, to me, might be the best natural bodybuilder right now. But that's I think that's my personal
Woo!
preference.
That's a hot take.
That's
Soundbite.
just the maybe it's because I was there in person. You know how that can influence you, like when someone
Mhm.
looks ridiculous
Yeah.
in person.
Yeah,
That
like
was
when we were at Mr. A last year, like we saw Bada, Meshach, Levi like feet from us. And it's we're in the bodybuilding trenches, but when you see it live, it almost doesn't compute.
Yeah, like, so I was right there. I was even backstage because I was coaching at Worlds when Fabian won the medals, and I was just like, how are you made out of granite? Like, you don't have
Yeah.
skin. You are like,
Yeah.
you're a skinless granite person. And it just, it was a level of hardness that was just like unique to him, that probably still has me swooning, as you can see, and maybe has colored my perception on how I should actually judge it. But
Okay.
yeah, I think
Super
Meshach
cool.
is really tough to beat as well. He's just such a nugget of muscle. Like that's a very difficult lineup. I would love to see that go down. I'll tell you what.
Well, boys, if you're listening to
very
this
different
podcast
physiques
by
too.
chance. Yeah, that's the thing. Like that lineup is such a vast of athletes, right?
Mhm.
Like you have Meshach, and then you have Bada, then you have this aesthetic Fabian, and then you throw like Magnum, who's like massive, Mitch, who is this like perfect proportioned body.
Yes.
Like it would have been, that would
Same
be,
with David K.
yeah, David too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Shit.
So yeah, it's pretty. That would be a very, very difficult lineup to judge. I wouldn't envy them, but I would love to see it. And I think, yeah, man, imagine, like, you could look them all up and see how many different bodybuilders they beat in every show and what titles they have and how many they've done.
Mhm.
I don't even think you need a weighting system. Like, I think you could just have, like, pro or amateur, which federations, and then just being able to click on them. This is actually an idea that I had from Brian Whitaker, like Brian Whitaker's old website that I think is still
I
active.
still go on that website to get photos for the Natty News page, because
There
there's
you
just
go.
like a database of his whole career is on there. I'll read his posts and then I'll get down to the gallery and I'll scroll through for sure.
And the cool thing is that he put the number of bodybuilders beaten at each show, because I think that's a metric that means something. Because to say, like for example, I can say, and people would be impressed, I'm the light heavyweight winner of the 2009 Washington State INBF show.
Yeah.
But if I told them, and there was two guys in my class, like, I beat one dude, I beat one dude and went to an overall. Like, that should be an asterisk on that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's
That is a metric of the like maybe the quality of the athlete, right? Like, pro card winner in a class of 3 versus pro card winner in a class of 13. There is a
yes.
difference.
100%. And it's not necessarily a difference, because you could be just like you would have beat another 30 guys. You're just that good.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at someone's longer career and you can see, like, in these classes of 10, they're placing second and third. In classes of 3, they're placing first. Like, I think that is something that should just be listed. And it'll also encourage people to go into more competitive shows. And another thing that I totally agree with you guys is that having more shows, it's like a positive thing in disguise. or a negative thing in disguise, I guess is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
you're basically, it encourages you just to kind of be lazy and just compete in your backyard on a weekend when you want, rather than go, I'm going to target this show. Because like in other countries, like here, there's one WNBF show a year, right? So I
Yeah.
got to get ready for September 30th, period. Um, and like Australia, it's a little bit bigger, but there's still a season A, season B, and there's big shows and people know about them and go to them. Same thing in the
Mhm.
UK. There's these highly competitive shows. People go and they're sought after. And I think just with the saturation that we have, I mean, how often do we find as a coach and even as an athlete, I can tell you that our competitors are asking, hey coach, do you think there's going to be enough athletes in this show to turn pro? I'm like, I don't know. Message the
Yeah.
promoter. And the
Yeah.
promoter's typical response is, well, you should enter so it's more likely, right? Which
Mhm.
means not right now.
No.
So
Yeah. Yep.
so I think it would actually be far better if there was a couple of regional shows tops per year, like a season A, season B, and stopped looking at it as like, hey, these are opportunities to make money and get a lot of entrants, because then you can get more of those entrants in the other shows. Like it's not actually going to lose you money, because you do have to pay for two venues, and the venues don't care. They're going to charge you the same rent for a day, whether you have 30 competitors or 60, right? So have one show and only pay one rent, and only have to do all the costs associated with putting on one event. Now, obviously, it is going to scale the cost to some degree, but two shows of 30 people cost more than one show of 60
Yeah.
Mhm.
in most cases, right? So I think it makes a lot more sense for, in my opinion, everybody involved to reduce the number of shows, increase their quality, and that would make tracking everything easier. It would make the likelihood of higher prestige and more competitive battles better. And I think that is something that doesn't require unification. That is just basically an incorrect strategy that I think the federations are taking right now. Of like, let's get more promoters. Like, you want to do a show, great. You figured out a place to do it, we'll do it, because they get a piece of every show. But you can have fewer shows with more contestants and get still a proportion of that same profits and make the same amount of money, and also have more prestigious events and more respect for the sport. So um, that's the way I see it. So I really do agree with you guys on that point as well.
Awesome. Sweet. I think this was a good chat, man. I'm glad you reached out to have this conversation, because we've been getting a lot of good feedback because we're doing this kind of talk more. And not a day goes by that at least one person's like, yo, I watched your episode with Eric, and there's a few things that you said that I didn't think about or that I really agree with, and that hopefully we trend in that direction. Because like you said, at the end of the day, we all want this to be better. It's just navigating how we make that happen. And hopefully talks like this land in the right ears.
Yeah. Another thing from powerlifting that might be worth thinking about is, in every single member nation, after the nationals, they typically have an annual general meeting. So you get, like, there's essentially a committee operating. And because powerlifting typically operates within like amateur sport organizational rules, there are like standing committees and there's members and they're voted upon. Natural bodybuilding, some of the organizations are like that, but a lot of them are just private companies. So they
Mhm.
can do whatever the hell they want. But I think if you were to have, okay, like one show per, like one or two shows per year, we have this meeting that's open to members, and we have like a committee that makes it like an advisory board to the federation heads on how to promote and expand and do all these things, and communicate what all the members of the federation want. I think that would be a really positive thing, because then you can make sure that some of these ideas don't just stay on a podcast or
Yeah,
on YouTube that the federation heads might not even be watching,
for sure. Yeah.
so
Yep.
yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. And best of luck these next 4 weeks.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time, and I really, really do appreciate what you're doing for the sport. Keep it up. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. All right,
I
people, if you
appreciate
enjoyed
you.
this episode, give us a like, follow for more, and we'll see you guys in the next one.